Friendly team to learn more about our range of custom and tailored services designed to suit your exact needs. Every one of our professionals have acquired years of experience, which ensures you get the very best. Our experienced staff is waiting to hear from you and to answer any specific questions that you may have on how we can meet your needs. Just ask for a consultation and let us prove our commitment to you as we promise to maintain the highest level of quality and commitment. Your satisfaction is our prime concern. So please, don't hesitate to get in contact with us and let us show you all the great options we have.
If he were made to realize how black people really feel and how fed up we are without that old compromising sweet talk. Stop sweet talking him. Tell him how you feel. Tell him what kind of hell you've been catching, and let him know that if he's not ready to clean his house up, if he's not ready to clean his house up, he shouldn't have a house.
And any man who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and willingly accepts the penalty by staying in jail in order to arouse the conscience of the community on the injustice of the law is at that moment expressing the very highest respect for law.
For there is another kind of violence, slower, but just as deadly destructive as the shot or the bomb in the night. This is the violence of institutions, indifference, inaction, and decay. This is the violence that afflicts the poor, that poisons relations between men because their skin has different colors. But we can perhaps remember, if only for a time, that those who live with us are our brothers, and surely we can begin to work a little harder to bind up the wounds among us and to become in our hearts brothers and countrymen once again.
Happy Tuesday. It's June 2nd, 2020. Welcome to Pump Up the Volume. My name is Luis Daniel Munoz, medical doctor, community advocate, and past gubernatorial candidate for the state of Rhode Island. Happy to be here on the Coalition Radio Network with several great community leaders, independent media, I would say stars here in the state of Rhode Island. And really today our focus is bringing to light some of the struggles, not only that we're facing as a country, but that we're facing specifically here in Rhode Island as we confront, injustices, systemic racism amidst COVID-19, as well as some of the most recent events with police brutality, again, throughout the country. And so joining us today, we have Representative Anastasia Williams. Thank you so much, Representative Williams, for joining us. We have Bill Bartholomew from the Bartholomew Town podcast, who's been out there covering the latest stories and recent events here in the state of Rhode Island. And we have Mr. Pat Ford, founder of the Coalition Radio Network and also the Coalition Radio Talk Show host. So happy to have you all on the show today. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to get right to it. I think it's really important that we tackle these issues and really understand, what's going on, what happened last night. So maybe leading the way, we can get kind of a bit of a summary with Bill, and then Bill, maybe you'll be able to hand it off to Representative Williams, and we can really get some depth, not only in terms of what's going on, but also what our leaders are doing about it. So Bill?
Sure. The rapid fire summary is last night at about 2:00 in the morning. My phone started going pretty crazy, started to get a lot of text messages from reporters and community leaders that it seems like, anyway, what happened was some bad actors rioted in downtown Providence. At around 6:00 this morning, I was on the scene and I could smell gasoline. You could see that a police cruiser had been set on fire and that a lot of windows had been smashed downtown. And I immediately got the sense that this was a faction that was far different from what had those who had gathered on the previous Saturday for the Black Lives Matter rally, which featured over 2,000 peaceful folks with a lot of beautiful messaging, a lot of tangible action plans being laid out, either in small groups or on the stage. And last night seemed to be a distraction from the sort of awakening that I had hoped would take place on a statewide basis, where people who maybe for whatever reason hadn't up until this point realized the social and systemic inequities that existed around really the world, but frankly, let's focus in here in Rhode Island and in this country for hundreds and hundreds of years. It seemed to be a bit of a distraction, and I had feared that certain members of the media and others would use the riots last night as a way to sort of steer the narrative away from the main conversation that should be taking place right now. There have been press conferences all day. Now we have curfew set. I've been going basically nonstop for the last 12 hours from one press conference to the next, going from various sites to the next, where, I just followed the Providence police to a house on Broad Street where, looked like about 30 police officers responded to try to break up a large group. So it seems like it's an active situation. The National Guard has been activated. And right now we're at a point where, the clarity as to who is actually out getting the media attention and wreaking havoc, it seems to be, from my perspective anyway, folks who aren't necessarily impacted by many of these inequities that we speak of, but rather some suburban white kids that have usurped the movement. So that's my assessment of where we're at right now, where once again, the core messaging has been disrupted by some folks with a different agenda. And that's my main concern as we look at what's happening tonight and probably for the next few nights here in Rhode Island.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Bill. Representative Williams, from your perspective, grassroots effort in the community, I'm sure you're hearing a lot from your constituents in terms of what transpired, what's going on. What are your thoughts on what's been happening and what happened yesterday?
Well, realistically, Dr. Munoz, there has been a lot of contact that has been coming since last night. I went to bed just about 1:30. So, it appeared that everything was under control. So I felt comfortable with that. And once I woke up by the telephone calls, I realized that it was a total disaster. But I find it to be like my brother Bill has just mentioned with regards to, it's a simple distraction. It's a distraction of the opportunity and the progress and the final goal that has been put in place because of the death of George Floyd. His death opened up the gateway, opened up windows, doors, every possible entry to this systemic problem that not only Rhode Island, but is happening across the country and in the world. But for me, my politics is local. I feel the pain. I have that visual of that officer kneeling down on George's neck proudly, just taking his life out. It was almost as though by him doing that, it was energizing him and his power of authority of being able to be the executioner of people of color, the executioner of death. He was in total control. So I hope that what took place early in the morning does not take root to become or to be the distraction for which it right now is. Because see, what I see and what I believe, that is to take away from the progress that is about to happen. So if we take our eyes off the real prize, we are going to continue to lose. So we need to remain focused. And many of us are not seeing it like that. Many of us are reacting exactly how it is planned for them to react. Put that fear, put that illusion, take away from the real issue. The world, the country, our state, our communities have changed and will continue to change. And some of the individuals, some people are not okay with that. And they are the old dollars, the old money, the old thinkers. Those are the ones who have the control. And they're afraid. They're afraid of something that they chose not to be part of because they were comfortable where they're at,
Right.
with what they have.
So Rep. Williams, today the governor, in response to an individual that had alluded to the fact that we still have Providence plantations, right, as pretty much, a reference to really I would say almost a beacon for Providence, right? This use of this word plantation on legal documents and so forth. And the governor, in response to that individual having pointed that out, said that Rhode Island has always been against racism, even though our history would say otherwise. I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are. I know that you had some words to exchange with the governor as well, but it really, I would say, really left me confused when the governor of a state that has a history of, of having enabled slavery would somehow try to deny that when people are crying out for change.
Well, the governor is in denial of a lot of things. Life, truth, period. It doesn't work for her. Our needs, our communities, we do not work for her. Her plans are different than our plans. Her lifestyle is different than our lifestyles. So as far as Providence and its plantation, knowing history, American history, here in Rhode Island, plantation stood for many of we had farmlands and so forth. So it represented that. But with times, it became a word that was very offensive. It remains a word that's very offensive. And what should have happened when the question was asked of her with regards to what was her feeling and what she could or should do about it, it should have been, it did go out for a vote. It wasn't campaigned well enough. It wasn't presented properly on understanding the effects of it. So the voters voted it down because they didn't quite understand it. So she could do that with an executive order. She has a lot of power, a lot of authority that she chooses to use it when she is going to be the only beneficiary or the best beneficiary at the end. So no, I'm not happy with her response. It wasn't a fair or honest one.
One of the issues that confuses me all the time, Representative Williams, is the governor's insistence that she's fighting. It's always, we're fighting for this, we're fighting for that. If I could ask her any question where she had the magic truth serum, if you will, and she had to answer directly, what is it that she's fought for? What is it that she's fighting for? And what is it that she will consider some type of fight for? I've never seen, whether it be any one of the dozens of failures in her administration, I've never seen for her fight for anything other than her own self-interest.
Well, that's exactly what she's fighting for. Her self-interest, her next step, her next journey. That's it. What makes her the best.
Yeah, and I'd like to. so to kind of trying to bridge Pat's point with, I think, something that I've been concerned about since last night. You know, we have youth, we have young adults, we have older adults, we have individuals that have faced injustices in their lives, throughout their lives, and they are angry and they have been promised change and it never comes. And so beyond just being empathetic, you know, when they talk about a revolution, it's hard not to understand why, in fact, there should be some form of revolution, right? Whether, you know, whatever form it might take. I mean, obviously, we all want it to be civil. So how do we bridge what's going on with these kind of radical insurgents that are attempting to take advantage of the protest, of the environment, while not diminishing or suppressing this energy that needs to be released by individuals in our community? Like, how do we go about doing that, especially in a time when the governor, I think, has been very reactionary in immediately going to mobilizing the National Guard when she didn't even do that after 3 weeks of COVID-19. So, you know, what are your thoughts, Representative Williams, in terms of both how should our youth, you know, be moving forward in this movement that needs to happen in light of these radical insurgents, and are the steps that the governor's taken against really some individuals last night were Youth Providence, right? They were there. Like, are the steps too radical, especially having taken them in less than 24 hours?
Yes, I think that realistically, the youth, the ones who are down for the cause, and as you mentioned, it's a variety of individuals, all different ages and races. And that's the good thing. It reminded me of when Barack Obama, you know, came out and he was going to be inaugurated. There was a feeling of, yes, we have arrived. You know, yes, we are going somewheres. And that was the feeling when protesters across the country had gotten together, locked arms, and started saying, enough is enough. George Floyd. But we have to, the youth have to, the older folks have to, the people who are really focused on making Black lives and all lives matter in the state of Rhode Island have to denounce those perpetrators. We can see them because if they're around us, we need to identify them. We need to nip them in the bud once and for all, because that's a distraction that's going to keep us from meeting and going where we have to go. But by the comments that the governor said, I listen a lot with regards to when she speaks, and she uses terms like criminals. Okay, she's dismayed. She preaches, but she doesn't practice. Okay, we need to denounce somebody, some of us, all of us need to strategize and denounce those individuals, those perpetrators, once and for all, because she's going to continue, not only her, but others. Calling the National Guard, Jen Rourke got harassed about getting lynched. She didn't call the National Guard or the state police so that they could investigate. That was on Zoom. That was on, you know, you have all kind of computer technical stuff that they could investigate it. I haven't heard anything with regards to any investigation about finding who those perpetrators were. So her coming out and adding fuel to the fire is unacceptable. It just feeds into these groups of individuals that's only there to serve for distraction.
Right. I mean, I often think of Ida B. Wells, you know, in times like this, you know, pretty much someone who's an activist in her time, a Republican back when Republicans were different, but someone who really raised arms to protect her community, and not only protect her community against the KKK, but also protect her community against those that would try to really take advantage of the community or kind of incite, violence in times when it wasn't needed. And so her life has always been interesting to me, and I think of her in moments like this. And so Friday, our youth is going to step up, right? Our youth will organize a Black Lives Matter protest, and I'm concerned with the current environment, not solely because of these radical insurgents, whoever they may be, because I do think that they are adult allies, and we're willing to be there, and we're willing to try our best to protect our youth and to protect the nature of the protest, but also because our governor has taken these radical steps. And so what is Friday looking like? Should our youth be concerned about their ability to protest peacefully without, kind of confronting riot police or National Guard members? It's just kind of a question I have, because we're seeing in other states a lot of abuses right now. I mean, it's a weird thing, right, to protest against police brutality, and yet we're seeing the worst of it. So just interested in hearing everybody's thoughts, Bill, Pat, Representative Williams, on what you think Friday, will look like given the current environment.
We haven't seen the worst of it yet.
Yeah.
We haven't seen the worst of it yet. But I'm very concerned about Friday, not because the youth is going to do what needs to be done on Friday. I'm concerned that the fire has been fueled, and the profiling is going to begin once again. Okay? And, regardless whether that you believe that there are adults, allies that were in them groups last night, I wouldn't be so quick, me personally, to say that. Not at 2:00 in the morning.
Oh, no.
We should not.
I was saying about Friday
coming out at 2:00 in the morning.
Well, I was saying Friday that there will be adult allies there. So allies that are adults on Friday.
I thought you meant last night. I was going to say no. Last night was not.
No.
No. Okay.
No. I'm in agreement with you there, 100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, the governor already added. She put in stuff. So Friday, we have to be strategic enough to understand and be prepared for Friday. Go in to do what we have to do. Don't be distracted by all this riot gear that's going to be over there. Because, the jump out boys are going to be there too. Because remember, in as much as the governor is looking for, it's going to be a peaceful rally, those jump up boys all have not been identified. I applaud them for being peaceful early this morning. But trust me, there's some of those that got the badge that's using it and are looking for the opportunity on Friday to do what they want to do. So, yes, she fueled the fire. And let's see if she's going to get what she's hoping for.
Representative Williams, I thought of the Jump Out Boys this morning. I'm listening to all the poobahs at the city of Providence and the corporate media echo about the professionalism and the unyielding, if you will, belief in civil rights. And I hear this time and time and time again. But it strikes me, and Bill, I'll throw this out to you because you do a lot of men and women and young people, if you will, interviews on the streets. But everyone I talk to in the urban core feels a direct daily threat by law enforcement. And I'm going to just end it with an optimistic note from me. And I'd love your reaction, Bill and Representative Williams, to that comment. But today in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and it's all over the web, the picture, it's a beautiful picture. Law enforcement, a la a certain football player, a certain quarterback, 60-plus law enforcement actually took a knee, if you will, in front of a line of protesters, completely by surprise. And it was a beautiful sight because, and you see at the tape ends, people from the community start to intermingle with law enforcement. because I believe it was an acknowledgement by members of law enforcement of, if you will, the sins, and an acknowledgement of the fact that Black lives do matter. And that just has to be a separate statement from all lives matter, that there's separate and distinct thoughts and philosophies. And perhaps I'm going to call on the National Guard in Rhode Island, because they are Rhode Islanders. They are part of the same community, to be moral men and women and only enforce moral laws. And to have that type of, I don't know, cooperation, that type of empathy with the folks who are protesting, that would be an astonishing sight.
Well, we just saw within the last hour, I mean, this is obviously a nationwide problem. We just saw in the last hour that the Minneapolis School Department has canceled their contract with the Minneapolis Police Department. So school resource officers, you know, the call for more guidance counselors and less police officers. You know, it's those small steps that are going to bring about some level of incremental change, right? And those are obviously are major steps when you pull school resource officers out and replace them with a guidance counselor, like you would, like, at least I think from my experience growing up, I don't think I had any police officers in my school building. Now we see, you know, in Narragansett where police officer in Pawtucket body slamming students. So there's distrust built for a long time within the school building, never mind on the street. So yeah, I mean, look, there are certainly folks who probably would say, look, I trust the police 100%. You know, if you did a poll, you know, I don't know if it'd come back 100%, but obviously the vast majority of folks in the urban core and even outside have a certain amount of distrust at this point for law enforcement, and particularly communities of color, and particularly those communities of color that are routinely impacted by systemic injustices. You know, I think we've got to defund the police. You know, that's my personal take on it. We've got to move backwards from where we've gotten to here and reinvent the role of what police means, especially in the context of the urban core. You know, talking to people on the street, I think that there's a growing sentiment now. And you mentioned the corporate media, you know, there's almost this behavior code, this sort of like unofficial, like, well, someone misbehaved, and if you resist the law, then somehow you're misbehaving. And it's this sort of juvenile way of thinking that adults and those in corporate media and others try to sustain. And I think more and more people are starting to use critical thinking and say, well, wait a minute, we need to be situational about some of this stuff and accept the fact that the police aren't always right, that politicians aren't always right, and we need to start thinking for ourselves. That's a bigger awakening than simply, you know, here in Providence or in any other city, the relationship between the police and its community. I will say, I believe Hugh Clements is a very solid police chief and has, relative to other law enforcement, you know, patriarchs / matriarchs, has done a good job of building relationships and more trust and at least dialogue with members of his community. Having said that, it's hardly at the point where like you say, Pat, the vast majority of folks in the urban core would be able to honestly admit that they trust their law enforcement agency.
Yeah, well, again, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your thoughts in this really difficult time. And my guess is we're going to need to have a few more of these conversations, right, before we can really better understand what are some actionable steps that we can take to address the injustices and to also make sure that we're unifying our community, right? And unity it's a really an important time for unity. You know, I've always been a fan of the 60s, even though I was born after. And one of the interesting elements of the 60s was that there was a civil rights movement that was happening in different ways with different leaders, but it was happening at the same time. And my hope for Rhode Island is that we can really come together and really just serve as an example for the rest of the country, you know, in terms of how to do it well. And I think Friday is that opportunity for us. I'm certainly going to try to be there, to stand with the youth and, listen, right? And as Representative Williams does on a daily basis, really try to hear what everyone is saying and to synthesize an action plan forward. And maybe one of the first steps for Providence youth is, in fact, to not necessarily have police officers in their school system, right? And maybe another step is to ensure, as Representative Williams has pointed out time and time again, and today to the governor, that we're inclusive of community leaders and organizations within those communities in any task forces, committees, or decisions that are being made, especially as they relate to law enforcement, policies regarding law enforcement, and funding, and where it should go to, because God knows we need it in other areas like healthcare as well. So there's a lot to tackle, and I just want to thank everyone here and for your time. I know that you're all busy out there in the streets getting information. Bill, Representative Williams, fighting the battles that need to be fought on a daily basis, and Pat, of course, providing this forum for many different leaders throughout the state of Rhode Island and even beyond to get some truth to power out there, right, into the world. So thank you all. We're at about time today, but my hope is that you all join us again next week on Pump Up the Volume. And hopefully by then we'll be talking about how we really mobilize our communities right around a strong protest and around actionable steps to create justice. So thank you all. Bill, Representative Williams, Pat, hope you have a great evening.
My pleasure.
And really looking forward to next week.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you again.
So that
Thanks,
we can
folks.
continue to pump up the volume, Dr. Munoz.
You know it.
Well,
Absolutely.
Let's all do a selfie together Friday afternoon. How about that? Okay.
Absolutely.
That sounds like a good
Sounds
plan.
good.
Yep.
Sounds good. For everyone
Take care.
tuning in, make sure next week, next Tuesday, 7:30 p.m., Pump Up the Volume on the Coalition Radio Network. Thank you.
Hey, you there, buddy?